한국말 잘못했어. 영어로 말할게요. 죄송합니다. So I'm going to speak a little bit about my experience in the last few years with Korean startups and maybe my vision for the future and what I think you should do if you're a Korean startup in Korea and my advice to you. So just a little bit about me, some background. I'm an entrepreneur, so I started at a very young age. I sold my first company to Microsoft for about $100 million. I sold the second company to Ask.com. I'm taking BeyondSecurity, it's my third company, to NASDAQ. So I'm a founder, I'm a startup founder. That's how I started. I was born in Israel. This is where I spent most of my life, and I spent the last 8 years in Silicon Valley. I invested in startups in Israel, in Silicon Valley, so I know those two ecosystems really well. And in 2011, I started investing in Korea. I've done 17 investments so far. You can see some of these companies here. I think some of them are going to do very well. So I think I have a little bit of perspective on the Korean startup ecosystem, what's working well, what's not working well. I kind of called it the good, the bad, and the ugly. You can see them over there. But I'll try to be a little more polite, and let's call them the opportunities and the challenges that we have right now in making the Korean startup ecosystem really, really good. So let's talk about the good, the opportunity. So if you're an entrepreneur here, if you're thinking about starting a startup today, you should know that today is the best time in history to start a startup. It is absolutely guaranteed. There's never been a better time to start a startup. Just to give you one quick example, the costs to starting startups are ridiculously low. All the technologies that the gentleman from SK showed you yesterday, the computing power for those technologies are costs less than you would pay for an Americano in Paris Baguette. It's ridiculously low. Here's an example for AWS, Amazon Web Services. If you want to buy a server, the entry level, and you want to pay upfront for the year, it's going to cost you $75 for a server upfront for the year. So for $75, you have your own server at Amazon. Hardware, software, networking, everything you need. It's amazing. It's never been like this in history. And if you need huge computing power, if you want to do something that is really complicated, this average kind of medium size, it's called M4 extra large. It's a really huge computing machine with a lot of CPU and a lot of memory. It's going to cost you about $4,000 upfront, or about $400 monthly, if you can see the slide. These numbers are really, really low. Anybody pretty much can pay $400 per month for a server it's a monster. It's basically a supercomputer that you can do anything with. So there's no really cost reason not to start a startup. And I think it's safe to say next year is going to be even better. It's going to be even cheaper. It's going to be even easier. So starting a startup it's a good time to do it now. There are less and less barriers. So you remember again the slide from the keynote before me talked about the time of BBS and all the other things. In the past, you actually, to do business in the US, you had to get on a plane and fly to the US. And today you can do that over the phone, over email, over webinars. There's no real barrier. It doesn't matter where you are geographically. You can sell to any company on the planet from anywhere at any time. You can do business with millions of people without leaving your house, all through the internet. It's incredible. It didn't used to be like this. And if you live in Korea, Korea is probably in the pole position. The race is starting. And I think, in my opinion, this is why I'm here. In looking at the other Asian countries, Korea is best positioned to be the next Silicon Valley. And I think there are reasons why it's very well positioned around the world. So the opportunity is huge. If you are thinking about starting a startup and you live in Korea, there's never been a better time. You're exactly in the right place. and hopefully you have the right idea. So what's stopping you? Here's some more good news. I've seen some amazing things in Korea. I know that Korea can do it. Korea has a few components that is hard to bring from the outside. It's hard to manufacture. You either have it or you don't have it. It has passion. It has the ability to do hard work. It has innovation. And if you heard anybody saying that there's no innovation in Korea, then you can just point them to a few of my startups. Here are 3 examples for startups I invested in. I saw Pokemon Go in 2015. An augmented reality game. You see this little character next to the coffee cup. They did it before Pokemon came out. They developed that technology on unrealpark.com. I saw the next virtual reality device interface using eyesight only. So you'll be gazing to where you want to go, and that's going to be your pointer. That's Visual Camp. I've seen, this is personally what excites me a lot, a new way to publish books. A way for you to write a book, publish it online, do it, market through social media. Those are all Korean companies, and they did all of these on their own. They weren't following anybody. They weren't adapting other technologies. They weren't optimizing. They were innovating. So there's definitely innovation in Korea. Now, let's talk about the other side of the scale. So what are the challenges? So we say this a lot, and it's going to come up again and again today, and it's important to say, so I'm going to say it again. Korean startups have an issue. They struggle to go global. Their focus is still on the local market, on the Korean market, on Japan and China. This is a big deal. This is a big deal for a lot of reasons. First of all, at least as of 2016, probably 2017, if you want to be number 1, you have to be number 1 in Silicon Valley. Just like if you want to be the number 1 movie star, you have to go to Hollywood. This is just the way things are. Now, I just said before, there are no barriers in terms of geography. You can be number 1 in Silicon Valley from Seoul. You don't have to necessarily move to Silicon Valley. There's no need for you to do that, but you have to be successful in the US. So when I say global, I mean the US. If you are very big in China, that's nice. Maybe you'll be rich, but you're not going to be you're not going to be the best. You're not going to be well known. You're not going to succeed globally. It's just how it is. And Korean startups are struggling to do that. They are having difficulties to take that step, and that's a big deal. That's going to stop their success. There's not going to be a success until Korean startups make it big globally, and that means start with the US. Now, there are cultural gaps, and probably this is one thing that I underestimated the most. I've been doing this for 5 years. I came in, I'm an entrepreneur, so as an entrepreneur, I'm optimistic. I'm an Israeli, so for Israelis, everything looks easy. We always look at something and say, we can easily do it. It's not a big deal. So I came into the Korean startup investing with those 2 things in mind, that it's easy, it's not a big deal, and I can definitely do it because I'm optimistic. And then I ran into a lot of cultural gaps that are problematic. I'll just name just a few quick ones just to give you a checklist so that you can see if it fits you. So what is the time that it takes you to make a decision? You should be making decisions within minutes, hours, days, and that includes everything. There is someone senior from Google here today. If he gives you an acquisition offer, you should say yes to him within 24 hours. Otherwise, he gets on a plane and you lose that acquisition offer. If you now start to think for 2 weeks, you're never going to see him again. You just lost your chance. Korean startups take a really long time to make decisions, and that's a big deal. There's problems in how Koreans communicate compared to other people global. All of these cultural differences are deep and make it difficult when startups go global. Now, another problem is the mentoring failures. So we have a lot of, this is a little weird in Korea. So we have a lot of mentors in Korea. And it sometimes seems to me that some Korean startups are looking at mentoring like it's an Olympic sport. Let's do as much mentoring as possible, like get points for it or something like that. That's not how mentoring works. Mentoring is not a sport. You don't get points for doing that. Mentoring is a tool, okay? It's like a shovel. You don't count how many times you use the shovel, you count how deep the hole is, right? If you take a hammer, it doesn't matter if your hammer is pretty or not, and you know how well you use it. What matters is the nail inside the wall. If the answer is yes, that's it. You've done your job. This is mentoring. Mentoring is like putting a nail in the wall. It's like digging a hole. And you have to use your mentors correctly, probably less mentors, maybe more mentoring. Use them a lot. And again, this to me is a surprise. I work with some Israeli startups, very few nowadays, and they bug me every week. Every week I get a request from one of my startups or someone else asking me to do something for them, introduce me to someone, write something for them, help them with something. And Korean startups are exactly the opposite. I can offer them help, and I will hear from them maybe once a month, maybe once a year, and it's going to be something very small, very vague, like let's meet for coffee. It's very hard to get them to ask me to do something for them. Why? Why? It's the whole point is not to meet with me. The whole point is for me to do something for you. Otherwise, why are we doing this mentoring? So there's a problem, I think, with how mentoring is defined and how mentoring is done. And finally, I think the last point is going to be the reason or the thing that defines if Korea is going to be successful or not in being a startup hub is the success story. So not many people realize it, but in Israel there was one day, one point that made the whole difference between startup nation and not startup nation. And history probably would have been different if without that day. And that day was when a company called ICQ was sold to America Online, to AOL, for $400 million. That was back in the 90s. That was that one exit, that one big acquisition that made everybody in Israel stop and say, wait, I want to be like these guys. I want to do a $400 million exit with software on the internet. And then, boom, startup nation. So it's not that easy. There's a lot of other components there. But just like when you make a cake, you can put all the ingredients. If you don't put it in the oven, it's not going to become a cake. So we have all the ingredients here in Korea. We need that success story. We need that boom moment where Korean startups can say, wow, I want to be like this guy. So with some luck, that will be one of my startups. And with some luck to you, that will be your startup. And as an ecosystem, we need that success story. If we don't get to the success story, we're going to be in trouble. So let's talk about what we're doing and how are we trying to solve this problem. And I'm saying we, because I am part of this ecosystem. I live here, I have an interest. One of the interesting things about startups in general and in this type of, there's a lot of names for it, but I'll call it creative economy, just to use the Korean phrase. Success is good for everybody. So everybody that's sitting in this room will benefit if we are successful, including me. If we are successful, and it doesn't really matter who is successful. So if someone here is successful, that affects all of us. That's good for everybody. So this is why I'm a part of this, and this is why I'm pushing for this success. So number one is, and I understand that Korea as a nation is taking the long-term approach. This is where I have the cultural gap from my side. I'm from Israel. We don't understand long-term at all, but I respect it. So long-term is good. There's a lot of benefits to it. I just want to remind one thing, though. In the long term, we're all dead. So let's not make it too much of a long-term thing. We need to maybe take a long-term approach to this creative economy, but maybe do it a little bit quicker before we're dead. And I've mentioned more mentoring and less mentors. We need to come to a way where mentoring is more effective than it is now. I think that Korean startups cannot succeed without mentoring. They cannot. They don't have, this is an external force that they need. If you take inexperienced founders, startup founders, and let them try to form a startup, it's not going to work. It's to let them try to find their way is going to take very long and has a small chance of success. But if we take the right mentors and use them correctly, and maybe teach the startups how to use the mentors correctly, I think if we do that, we will do well. I think there are some excellent mentors in Korea and outside of Korea that want to help. My personal small contribution to this is bringing mentors from Israel to Korea. And the reason I'm choosing Israel is I think Silicon Valley mentors don't always understand the challenges for startups outside of Silicon Valley. So many things Silicon Valley mentors will tell you are true because they're in Silicon Valley and things are very easy for them. And they're not true when you're outside of Korea. So I'm trying to learn Korean, and I keep getting these advices that don't work for me because I don't know Korean. So for someone to give me a tip because they were speaking Korean when they were 2 years old, that's not really helpful for me. Give me a tip for someone who started learning when they were 40. That's helpful. The Korean startups need the same thing. They need tips from people who were not born and raised or started their startups in Silicon Valley, but outside. Israelis do that really well. Israel is very far from Silicon Valley and very successful. Ask them what they did, how they break in, and learn from that. That's what I'm trying to do. And of course, finally, trying to create the first success story. So as I said, this is the make or break moment. If we are successful in making this good success story, this Korean startup that goes global, that becomes successful. Success, by the way, that's also another important thing to define. Success in the startup world is really easily defined, and we have to be careful to stick to the definition. Success is measured by money. And I'm sorry for all the idealists here, but there's just one way to measure it. You measure running with a stopper, and you measure success with money. And success for startups means an acquisition or an IPO, because these are the only two ways where you can make money, when you make money and where there's a dollar value on your company, basically. So we need to take a Korean company, we need to take them global. Global right now means the US, Silicon Valley, and we need to get them to an exit, to an M&A or an IPO. And once that is done, I think that's going to trigger a chain effect with things that are already in place, with a lot of startups, with a lot of innovation, a lot of founders, a lot of mentoring, and let's make that cake. My email is down here. I'm happy to help with anybody who wants to help Korean startups become successful, or any Korean startups that want to do that. And hopefully one of you here will make it happen, and there will be the success story that everybody will follow. Thank you very much.
네.